Chumash and Rashi, the Torah portion, the weekly portion. Shoftim, continuing with various mitzvahs. These mitzvahs that have to do with the land. All right, there we go.
Good morning.
Good morning, the people in Diane. Let's get right to the Torah portion. Okay, we are in Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse number 1. The third reading. Lo iya, it should not be lekahanim alevim, to the kohen, the Levites, meaning kohen because they come from the tribe of Levi, of the Levites. Kol shevet Levi, for the entire tribe of Levi. Chelik, a portion, v'nachala, an inheritance, im Israel, with Israel, meaning with the rest of the Jewish people. Ishe Hashem, the fire of God, v'nachalosai yechelu, and the inheritance they shall, and his inheritance, God's inheritance, they shall eat. All right, what does this mean? Let's find out. A lot said over here. Kol Shevet Levi, the entire tribe of Levi, Bain Tamimim, whether they are blemish-free or Bain Balimumim, or whether they have blemishes. In other words, if they have a blemish, they are disqualified from the temple service. But that doesn't mean now that they get a portion of the land. Doesn't mean that they're not a kohen. To still a kohen, they have to do other kind of work. If they have a blemish, they would check the wood to see if it was wormy and if it was appropriate. Different tasks that they would have. They wouldn't do the offerings though. That's why it means kol, all. Chelek, they have a portion, but biza in the spoils of war. Interesting.
Why is he not mentioning the Kohanim?
What?
Why is he not mentioning the Kohanim? Gold Shevet Levi.
So there's, I should say, the way it translates over here. Let me see how it translates over here.
He's bringing words that are Bosek anyway. Kol Shevet Levi. Oh, Kol Shevet Levi. Yeah, Levim, Kol Shevet Levi.
The first one is speaking about the Kohanim that are Levites, and then it adds something. The whole tribe of Levi. What? That's superfluous. You just said, right? What's that coming to add? So that's what Rashi's bothered by. He's not bothered by saying Kohanim Levim. That's a term that's been used before, right? It's just to identify them as Kohanim that come from Levi, right? They come from come from Levi, right?
It's all inclusive.
That there's something added now when you say Kol Shevet Levi, all of the tribe of Levi. It's not, doesn't mean just the Kohanim now, right? And even if so, you would, what is it? The kol means even if they're pure or impure, they have a blemish, they still are a Levite, right? So, So actually, this is not speaking about the Levites. It's speaking about the Kohanim that come from Levi. All of them, right? It's not speaking about Levites here.
None of them have a Caleb.
Right, but it's not speaking about you're right, and a Hanami, but that's not the reference over here. That's what, no, that's why Kol is coming. That's true, but no, because blemish is about a kohen only. Kohen that has a blemish can't do the avodah, right? So what's going to include that even though they still are, they still get a spoil of war. They get a portion of the war, spoils, right? Nachala, they don't get an inheritance in the land. Ish Hashem, Kodesh Hamikdash. What do they mean? They get the sanctified offerings of the holy temple. That's only Kohanim. Levites don't get a part of the temple sacrifices, right? So just to see clearly that we're not talking about Levites over here. We're talking about Kohanim that come from Levi. Okay. Now, long Rashi over here. Here's another book. I'm going to pass this down. Thank you. His inheritance. Elu Koche Gvul. What is this referring to? What's his inheritance? These are the holy of the borders. That is Trumas and Maestris. And what does it mean of the borders? Meaning that are within the borders of Israel, the land of Israel, that the Kohanim get. What is it? Truma and Meiser. It's interesting over here. So now with Truma, it goes to the Kohen. Meiser, also Meiser, this Trumas Meiser, that also goes to the Kohen, as opposed to Meiser itself. Aval Nachla Gemura, but a complete inheritance, he doesn't have among his brothers. So that's what Rashi explains as a simple meaning. Now he brings from the Sifri that it expounds. Nachla lo yeloi, that inheritance he will not have. Zu nachlas shar, this is an inheritance of the rest, among his brothers. Zu nachlas chamisha, this is the inheritance of five. Okay, let's see what that means. But I don't know what it is. Oh, okay. Meaning that the three means the inheritance of the rest and the inheritance of five. Nirali, but it appears to me that from the land of Canaan, which lies opposite the other side of the Jordan, right? Nikras Eretz Chamisha Amamim. It's called the land of five nations. The Shel Sichon Ba'oig and the land of Sichon and Oig, Shnei Amamim, are two nations, namely Amori, Ukanani. So you have the Amorites and the Canaanites, V'nachalas Shar, and then the inheritance of the rest, which is five. The rabbis Kini Kanizi B'Kadmoini, which comes to include the Kini Kanizi Kadmoini, which is on the other side of the.
See inside.
Okay, Cain Derish, similarly, the Sifri expounds the Parshas Matanis when it comes to the passages of the gifts for the Kohanim, Shenemar Laron, that was told to Aaron. We had that in Parshas Kairach. Al Cain loy haya Levi, therefore Levi did not have a share in the inheritance like his brothers. Mahazir al Kini Kanisi Kadmoni, to also include Kini Kanisi Kadmoni. That's where Menashe, Ruvain, Gad, and half of Menashe on the Transjordan got their inheritance in that land, so the Levites don't get there either. So it means on the Transjordan also they don't get. The Shuv Nimtza B'Divrei Rebbe Kolmanus. Further, it's found in the words of Rabbi Kolmanus. This is the text, the way it's understood in the Sifri. And an inheritance will not be to him, right? And our verse is saying he doesn't get an inheritance. We're trying to understand what do those words mean. This is the inheritance of the five. Among his brothers. This inheritance of seven refers to Nachlas Chamisha Shvatim, the inheritance of five, and Nachlas Shiva Shvatim, the inheritance of seven tribes. So you have the seven that are in the land of Canaan, but you also have five and that's Kanani Ma'amori together with Kini Kinazi Kini Kini Kinizi B'Kadmoini. That makes 5. Since Moshe and Yeshua allotted the inheritance to none but the 5 tribes. Because Moshe allotted for Reuben, Gad, and half of Menashe. Yeshua Yehuda Ephraim, and Yeshua he allotted the portions for Yehuda and Ephraim, and half of Menashe, right? So that gives us 5. The Shiva Achirim, there were 7 other tribes. Not Lumi Aleim, they took their portions on their own. Achri Meis Yeshua, after the death of Joshua. That's why Yizkir Chamisha Levad, that's why 5 are mentioned by themselves. The Shiva Levad and 7 by themselves. Aha. Okay. So 5 then refers to Yehuda and Ephraim that got in Israel proper from Joshua, and then Transjordan, right, and half of Menashe, right? So that's 2.5, and 2.5 got Transjordan, right? The other half of Menashe together with Reuven and Gad. That's 5. That's what Moshe and Yoshua gave, allotted. The other 7 tribes took on their own. And therefore, the verse over here is speaking about those 5.
Why separating from?
I mean, why is the verse separating it? I don't know.
Does that mean they can have from the 7?
No. So no, they the whole question is, why does he bring this whole Sifri? It's a drush, right? Why does he bring it all together, right? Because the first explanation that he gave, he just said Nachalasa means in his inheritance, meaning in the borders of the land of Israel. Which makes sense simply. Like why Rashi went through this whole thing now? I don't know. We need to understand. You follow the question? Right. We understood it without it. What did this add? It's a little confusing. Right. It seems to be a not the simple meaning, but the expounded meaning. When Rashi comes down, only explain the simple meaning. So why did he have to bring it all up? And in that, there were so many different ways to understand the Sifri. Okay, I don't know. Let's go to verse number 2. Menachala and his inheritance. Like. Oh, that's together with this verse over here. Okay. Lo will not be for him b'kerevecha amongst his brothers. Hashem hu nachalosa. Hashem is his inheritance. Kasher diber lo, as he spoke to him. Okay. Nachla lo yeloi ela nachla chamisha. Okay, we went through all of this. Yeah, here. Okay. I had it over here in one long Rashi. Here it's divided up. Okay, we're going to go to verse number. Kasher diber Eloi, he spoke to Ba'artim Eloi sinchol ani chalkecha. As I said to Aaron, that you shall not inherit the land. I am your portion. I'm your inheritance. Right, which means the service that the Kohanim are going to do in the Holy Temple. Okay, verse number 3. And this will be the law of the Kohanim. Me'es ha'am, from the people, me'es zivchei hazeva, from the the performance of slaughtering as im shore, whether it be an ox or a seh or it be a lamb, kid. Benasan l'kayin, you have to give it to the kayin. Hazraya, you have to give him the foreleg. Halachayim, the jaw. Ha'akeva, and the stomach. All right. Let's see Rashi in number 3. Me'esa'am, from the people. V'loy me'esa kahanim, not from the kahanim. And the kohen doesn't have to give from his animal to another kohen, right? He keeps it for himself. Im shorim said, whether it's an ox or a lamb, kid, prat l'chai, this is an exclusion of a wild animal. In others, like a deer, right?
Don't we already know what animals could be offered?
These are not offerings. These are the parts of the animal that belong to the kohen.
What parts of which animals?
We just said it.
Which animals?
An ox or a
Offered?
kid.
Not offered? Which animals?
You said yeah, an ox or a lamb.
So,
And I don't think it's just from offerings. I think any animal. I think it's even if it's chulin. Let's go further and see. I'm not 100% certain. It's from chulin. I think it means if I'm slaughtering an animal now for the holiday, if I'm slaughtering an animal, there are certain parts of that animal that belong to the kohen. Simple. Not from the. I think it's even just my own personal animal that I would slaughter, right? These are things that belong to the kohen. I think it means chulin. In other words, not because an offering on the altar, if it's an oila, for example,
not sacrificial.
right? If it's an oila, for example, it's completely burnt on the altar, right? So, but let's see further. I want to make sure. I think that's what it means. Let's see if Rashi brings it up. So continuing in Rashi, Hazraya, the foreleg, mina perek shel arkuba. This is the joint of the arkuba. The arkuba. Al kafayad, on the shoulder blade. Yeah, it's where it goes to the shoulder. Shikarin, and it's called espalando. Halachaim, the jaw, im halashim, together with the tongue. And those who expand the verse, they would say, Zraya tachas yad, the foreleg represents the hand. Shenemar zrika achrei mach biyadeh, he took a spear in his hand. V'lechaim tachas tefillah, and the jaw represents prayer. Right, so we have hand prayer. Shenemar, as it says, V'yamei Pinchas v'yifalel. Pinchas rose up and he prayed. I don't know how that fits in with the jaw. I mean, you have to move your jaw, I guess, in order to pray, but I don't know where the verse proves it. The akeva tachas in the stomach represents a isha al kavasa, the woman into her stomach. This is Pinchas. Remember when Pinchas killed Zimri, right? So that's what the reference is over here. It seems like it's connected with what Pinchas became a kohen then, remember, with what he did, right? He got the covenant of peace and became a kohen. He was a grandson of Aaron, but when the inauguration was made of the Kohanim, he was too young to be inaugurated. So he wasn't inaugurated. 40 years later, he was older, and now he got the covenant for the act that he did. So the act he did was with his hand, he took a spear, and into the stomach of the two of them, he killed them. And for some reason, it sounds like, what he's alluding to over here is this: it became the gift, that the Kohanim got because of what Pinchas did. That's what it's, sounds like over here.
Before it was appointed by Hashem after Pinchas became from father to son. That's where it started.
Right, it was from father to son, except for him, right? Because he wasn't right. Exactly. Okay, so that also needs a little understanding. Okay, verse number 4. Reishis. Reishis means the first. The goncha of your grain. Tiroshcha, your wine. Vitzar your oil, referring to olive oil. Reishis gaze, and the first of your gaze is the shearing, tzaincha, of your flock. Titen loy, give to him. Give to who? The kohen. Okay, so let's see what this means over here. What does it mean, the first of your grain? Reishis de goncha, zu truma. This refers to truma. Truma is the 2% that you would give. It means 1 in, 1 in 50, right? You would give, and let's see what Rashi says over here. V'loy pirish bashir. It doesn't say how much. Doesn't say a specific amount how much you're supposed to give according to biblical law. But our rabbis, they establish an amount they have to give. Ayin yafa. If you're generous, give 1 in 40. Ayin ra. But if you have a bad eye, you're being miserly, then you're going to give echad mishishim. You're going to have 1 in 60. Beinin is the middle, which is neither extreme. Echad michamishim, 1 in 50. Right. So now this is not clear. This is not from the verse. He's saying this is what the sages said you should give, right? So the minimum, the average amount would be 1 in 50, 2%, right? And you're giving that from your produce to the kohen. V'samchu ala mikra, and they drew a support from the Torah. That you shouldn't give less than 160. Shenemar, because the verse says, where the verse is in Yecheskel, in Ezekiel, Shishis Efa Chomer Achitim, that the truma which you separate has to be 1/6 of an ephah from a chomer of wheat. From a chomer of wheat. Shishis Efa Chetzi saw, 1/6 of an ephah is half a saw. Kishaatanes and Chetzi saw, the core, when you give half a saw per core, Hare echamishishim, you're going to come out 1 in 60. Shakor shloishim sein, because a core is 30 saw. I don't know, some 67 gallons. Whoa. Okay. Next Rashi. Reishis gaze tzaincha. The first shearing of your flock. Kishal gazes tzaincha. When you shear the flock, b'chol shan every year. Tei mimena reishis l'kohen, give the first of it to the kohen. Look, Pirish Bashir, also they didn't specifically give an amount here in the verse. But our rabbis, the sages, they gave an amount. 1 of 60th. And how many of the flocks are the minimum to make an obligation to shear from the flock? 5 ewes. As it says, 5 asuyos, 5 prepared sheep. Rabbi Akiva arrived to a total of 5 as follows. Reishis Geis Shtayim. The first shearing implies 2. Why? Aha. If there's the first, that means it implies there has to be also second. There has to be something left over from the first you take, right? So it has to imply that there's something else. So that implies 2. Tzoincha, your flock. The arba brings you to 4. Titin lo, they shall give him arei chamisha. This is 5. Whoa, interesting math over here. Since soicha means your flock in the plural, so it also means 2. 2 and 2 equals 4, and then that you shall give is 5. Means to say, when do you have to give? Like, when do you say you give 1/60th of the shearings? When you have 5 sheep. Got it? Because if you had just one, you don't have to. It's too small of an amount that you're going to give. But you have 5 of them, and you're going to give 1/60th of the total of the 5. That's something, worthy of giving to the kohen. That's when you're obliged to give. Okay, last verse. Key for boy Bachar, in him Bachar chose. Hashem, your God, chose him. Mikol Shvatecha, from all of the tribes, meaning the Kohen he chose, right? Lamoy, to stand, V'lisharis, to serve, B'Shem Hashem, in the name of God, who, him, the Kohen, Ubanav and his sons, Kol Hayamim, all of the days. Rashi Lamed Lisharis, what does it mean? To stand and to serve. You can't. From here we learn She'ein Shirus, that when you are serving and ministering for Hashem, that you do it only mu'umad while you're standing. Yeah. Okay. Let's see the Rebbe on this. So on verse number 4, the Rebbe asks, remember you said 1 in 50. If you gave 1 in 50, that's a middle ground. 1 in 40 is with a good eye. 1 in 60 is a bad eye, right? Being miserly, right? And where does this all come from? From the sages, right? So the Rebbe asks a question: why does Rashi bring this up? Rashi's to explain the verse. The verse isn't saying it. So the fact that this is what our sages explain. Okay, that's wonderful, but it's not the simple meaning of the text, and he's coming to explain the text. Why is he giving this teachings over here, right? And if it is important to know that, this is not the first time we learned this. We learned this already in Parshas Kairach, and there Rashi doesn't explain it. Why didn't he explain it there? And if that's the case, also earlier in Parshas Korach, where this is the original place where we have the gifts that are given to the Kohanim, right? Because remember, Korach started up, he wanted to be the Kohen Gadol, right? So Hashem then gave the various gifts, 24 gifts to the Kohanim, right? So why doesn't Rashi explain over there other gifts that were given, like Bikurim, first fruits? What is the minimum amount? Doesn't say. Okay, so the Rebbe says we could say as follows. Here we had to explain these measures, the amount according to the sages, because there's specifically in our verse over here, in the context of what we're learning over here, there's a question. There's a difficulty. The mitzvah of Truma and giving the first shearings are coming in the flow of the words of the text that came before that. What did it say? That it will not be to the Kohanim, the Levite, that are Levites, all of Shevet Levi. Then won't have a nachala, an inheritance with Israel. The fire of God, that is his inheritance. And that's what they eat. In other words, that the gifts to the Kohanim, right, are in exchange for not getting a piece of the land, getting a piece of land that they could grow from the land, right? So as a result of that, a question arises. How's it possible that gifts that doesn't have an amount of what the gift is, right? How much the gift is, that to such a degree that, maybe 1 grain is suffice. Maybe the Torah, doesn't give an amount, so I can give 1 grain to the Kohen and I fulfill my obligation, right? So since this is, that what they're supposed to, because the verse says this is what they're eating as their gift, right? To eat. So it's got to be something that's edible. That's why he then, as a result of that, gives the amount that will be something that will be a parnasa for them, that they gain something from it, right? That's why over here he gives it. Otherwise, in other words, earlier in Kairach, it wasn't a question because there it didn't express it that this is their livelihood that they're getting in the place of the work that they're doing. Okay.
The war with Midian was after.
The war with,
So there's a lot of spoils there.
well, it seems being in spoils means any war, they would get spoils. Though I thought before that they didn't get spoils. Maybe it was just of that war.
First time.
No, they got, yeah. Elazar got from Midian. Yeah, they got, yeah. Okay, let's take a moment for another thought over here. Actually, we're going to go back to the other day. Remember that whatever the Sanhedrin will tell you, the High Court will tell you, do not move to the right or to the left. Whatever they tell you, right? Yamin is small. That's right. Don't stray. Yeah. So even if they tell you that the right is left and the left is right, Rashi says, right?
Well,
So in the Sifri, where this is taken from the Medrash, if they show you and before you, even if they show you in your eyes that the left is the right and the right is the left, listen to them. Rashi takes away that they show you in your eyes. And there's a great distinction over here. According to the Sifri, even if they're showing you clearly in your eyes on the left that it is right, it sounds like they're speaking about it in a case where there is two sides to see things. right? The way you see it in your eyes, the way you understand it in your mind, and that which the Beis Din, the way they see it, right? But Rashi takes away that they show it to you in your eyes, showing that even in an instance where there's definitely a mistake by Beis Din, they said right is left. Not only what you saw, meaning that there's right, but right is left. You still have to follow what the Beis Din says. So the question the Rebbe asks, this is like wondrous. How is it possible that the Torah, which is the Torah of truth, would teach us that a person should go in the path that the Torah recognizes that there's a mistake over here, because the right is right and the left is left. Yet the Torah tells you if they say that the right is left and the left is right, follow them. How could the Torah tell you that? So we can understand this by foundational teachings in the Talmud Jerusalem Talmud, that there is a power in Beis Din to change the reality in the world through their adjudication of law. And this is what we mean over here. When the Chachmei Torah, when the wise ones of Torah, they say that the left is the right, that the thing becomes a change in the reality of this world. And therefore the left becomes the right. The left becomes the right.
So that's the message for everything in the laws.
Yeah.
I put my left shoe on the right foot. And I put the right shoe on the left foot.
That's a human engagement, right? That's not this here. That's not what this is saying, right? Chacham doesn't do that.
The right and the left.
So Chacham doesn't do that.
The right shoe on the left foot. The left shoe on the right.
I think it's right what you're saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely right.
It's the right
shoe.
shoe.
The right and the left.
It's the right shoe.
The right shoe. The left foot. I'm putting the right shoe on the left foot. And I'm
That's
putting the left shoe on the right foot.
Right.
Yeah. That's the first mitzvah. First mitzvah in the Torah. What's the first mitzvah in the Torah? Tiyidin. HaChodesh hazeh lachem. HaChodesh hazeh lachem is the first mitzvah, right? So the Rebbe explains that that has to do with time, and has to do with the new moon, right? Well, we know exactly when the new moon is. The sages knew to 5 decimals when the exact timing of the new moon is. Yeah, Torah says don't do it based on what the nature of the moon and the science of the moon is. Do it by the sight of 2 witnesses, and it's the sight of 2 witnesses that come to the court of law. What makes it a new month? Because they cited it? No. When the gavel is hit and the Chachamim, the Beis Din says that they say that it's Rosh Chodesh, they say it's Rosh Chodesh. The moon really came a day earlier, but it was cloudy and they couldn't see it, right? So the witnesses only were able to see it a day later. No, as the Rebbe explains, that Beis Din is balabas over time. They are the authority of time. Even though time, what do you mean? Time is every minute is a minute, and it's independent of me. No, the Beis Din, the court of law, has the power over time, and therefore we're not bound by time, but we have the power over time, which is a very big, novel idea. All right.